Hello everyone, Charles Watts here. Welcome back to Inside Arsenal. It is Saturday. I hope the weekend is going well wherever you're watching or listening to this around the world. FA Cup weekend, of course, the third round gets underway. Well, it's already got underway because of the new format in FA Cup. Got underway on Thursday night, which is all a bit weird. Arsenal wait until Sunday to get their campaign underway. Hopefully, fingers crossed, it's going to be a campaign that lasts a little bit longer than it did last season with that third round exit against Liverpool. This time, of course, it's the third round game against Manchester United. So we'll talk about that in today's show. Now, a little disclaimer at the start of this. When I said it's Saturday, technically it is because that's when you're watching or listening to it, but I'm recording it on Friday evening because as you're watching this, or certainly as it's being published this morning, I'll be driving down the motorway, taking my children to this day out at this zoo safari thing that was a sort of late birthday present for my daughter. So I had to record it on Friday night if I wanted to get a show out. So if there's anything massive that has happened in the hours after recording this before publishing it, that is why I haven't spoken about it, because I just don't know, because I'm recording it on Friday evening. So apologies if I have missed anything, but if I wanted to get a show out, I just had to do it now on Friday evening. Otherwise, it wouldn't be possible. So that is the reason I'm doing it now. Anyway, I wanted to talk about a little bit more from what Mikel Arteta was saying at his press conference yesterday. Obviously, I did a very quick sort of brief rundown of it from my car at the training ground. But I wanted to explore some of his comments in a little bit greater depth in today's show. We're going to look at the Manchester United game as well. Look at what Arteta was saying about that and some of the big sort of decisions facing him. Got some comments from you guys in terms of what you would like to see for that Manchester United game as well. And I thought it was an interesting press conference yesterday. It's not always the case. And as I said yesterday from my car, I wasn't sure what sort of mood Mikel was going to be in at the press conference because it's been a tough week. Obviously, on the back of the Newcastle game, he's been getting some really bad press on the sort of back of those comments about the ball as well. And I just thought he was going to be in a pretty bad mood. He was actually, I thought, pretty good, and he spoke pretty well on a lot of subjects. So on transfers in particular, I thought it was very, very interesting. I don't think he necessarily said stuff that we as fans love to hear, because you didn't sort of come away from that press conference thinking, yeah, we're definitely going to make some signings. We're definitely going to bolster the attack and maybe add some goals to the team. Didn't have that sort of takeaway from it, but there was still some interesting stuff. I thought this stuff was very sort of eye-opening potentially when it came to the owners and the board and the discussions that the club are having. So he was asked in relation to what Ian Wright said after the game against Newcastle, where he said the board needs to help Arteta now. He needs some help from them because with this squad, they're not going to score enough goals. And he was asked about that, and Wright said, and Arteta said, I have so much support from the board. I continue to have it. We are all seeking and willing to do the same thing, which is to win the maximum amount of football matches in a way that we want to play to achieve the goals we want, which is to win trophies. That support continues to be there, but we have our limitations. Not the first time he said limitations in the press conference yesterday, which is quite interesting. Although the first time he said it, you could sort of look at it and take it two ways, whether he was talking about limitations in terms of injuries and spaces in the squad, or if he was talking about sort of financial limitations. He was then asked if he's having discussions with the board and the owners above him, and he said, we always have discussions with those with those above, discussing how we can improve the team, whether if the market is open or closed, because we have to plan for the necessities right now and what the necessities are in medium and long term. So discussions are always open. And he's right, as I've reported before. You know, they flew over in November from here to LA to meet with the owners to talk about the summer transfer window. So, you know, you're always having those conversations now, but you're also having the medium to long term conversations with him as well. But the limitations thing is very interesting. I have to admit, I didn't pick up on it at the time. It's very hard when you're in a press conference, you're sitting there, you're typing, all stuff's going on. You don't always hear every single word that they say. And I didn't quite pick up on limitations. I'd already asked my questions anyway, so I wasn't going to get any more questions to sort of follow up on that. But I do wonder about Tuesday's press conference ahead of the Spurs game, if it's on Tuesday, and if I'm able to go, sort of trying to follow up on that in terms of what he means. Because I think it's quite interesting. Is he talking about limitations in terms of the wage bill? Is he talking about limitations in terms of what the board are willing to sanction in terms of transfer fees? All those sort of things. I think it certainly raises some sort of interesting questions potentially in terms of what he was talking about. I mean, that relationship he has, you know, that is true. He has a very strong relationship with the board and with the owners. You know, that is true, but the limitations sort of comment on the back of what he said about Alexander Isak after the game against Newcastle as well, which again, you could perceive it in a couple of different ways. Was it a bit of a message to the board saying that that's what top quality gets you up front in Alexander Isak? You know, was that a bit of a sort of dig of I haven't been given what I wanted up front, all that sort of stuff. So I thought it was quite interesting what he had to say in response to the right comments. Sort of opening up further on transfers, and when he's talking about if the forward is a priority, he says no, which again, not too many of us are going to want to hear that, but that's what he said. No, he said the circumstances change because we have certain injuries for some big players. So it's always a possibility, but it's always about somebody that is really going to make us much better. On whether he would like a versatile forward or out number 9, he said in the front positions compared to what other clubs have done and the expenditure that we have there, we are very far from it over the years for different reasons. Firstly, that we have already have very good players and we have many necessities in the squad to achieve in that period. I mean, there is the numbers are pretty remarkable. Just get them up quickly here. Jordan over the Athletic had sort of crunched the numbers in terms of what Arsenal have done and how they've spent. So under Mikel Arteta, they've spent 299.2 million on defenders and goalkeepers. They've spent 275.4 million on midfielders, and they've spent 140 million on forwards. So that's less than half what they've spent on the defence and the goalkeepers. And in that includes the fee for Kai Havertz as well, who, let's face it, was signed as a midfielder. So he wasn't actually, that money wasn't spent on a forward. It's just ended up he's become a forward because it didn't really work in midfield. So you could almost add his transfer fee onto the midfield totals, which would take it to about 330 odd million, and take that off the forwards total, which would take it to under less than 100 million, which is pretty remarkable in that amount of time. Obviously, he's been blessed to have the likes of Martinelli and Saka already in the squad when he arrived. So he has had some good forwards that he's been able to sort of fall back on. But there's definitely a need. It's very, very obvious. And as he said there, the expenditure between what Arsenal spent on forwards and what other clubs have spent on forwards is massive difference in that. And he was asked if that focus on the squad building will now shift from the defence and the midfield. And he said, yes, it will, because we have certain limitations. We have a lot of gaps and a lot of things to cover because of the team that we want and the ability of those players. But can you afford them? And even if you want to, sometimes it's not possible. So I just think it's really interesting what he's talking about there. Again, he mentioned the words limitations. It's hard to work out if he meant limitations in the squad, as in gaps that needed to be filled, or if he's talking financial stuff. So yeah, it was. I just came away from the press conference thinking it was pretty interesting what he'd had to say about transfers and everything like that. So yeah, that was on that. Obviously, we've got the big game against Man United now to come on Sunday, and that's a big focus. If you're watching on YouTube, you see some pictures from training. It looks very, very cold there. If you're judging by the steam coming off Gabriel Jesus and during Tim, it was very cold. I got back from the press conference yesterday. I would put the washing on the line before I went out just because it was sunny. I thought, maybe it'll get a bit dry. And my t-shirt was literally frozen. I've never not seen it like that before. Generally took it off the washing line, and it was frozen. You're not here to watch that, though, are you? To listen to that, though. So you're probably not interested. But that's how cold it was. And it did look very, very cold when you're looking at the training pictures from Arsenal yesterday. You didn't see any of the sort of potential injured players coming back. So Ben White, Tommy Asu not involved in those pictures, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're not going to be around. But I think Ben White is definitely too early. I imagine it is for Tommy Asu as well. So I'm not expecting any of the injured players to come back. Could we see Neto? Could we see Neto make his long-awaited Arsenal debut this weekend? Mikel was sort of asked about him and the contribution he's made off the field since he's arrived on loan from Bournemouth, even though he's not yet played a single minute of first-team action. He says it's always the case for players who have not played many minutes. In his case as well, because he was cup-tied in the Carabao Cup, and David Raya has done so well in the league. We will decide if he plays what's the best option, because historically the cup competitions have changed a lot. When you look at last week, the lineups years ago were completely different, so everybody has to be available and ready to play. When he talked about that, I think he's probably talking about the strength of the teams that were played in those semi-finals, whereas before there was always a lot of rotation, even if you got to the semi-finals. But this week, between the sort of Arsenal, Newcastle, Liverpool and Spurs games, there wasn't much rotation going on. So that I felt was a little bit of a hint that it's going to be David Raya who plays. I think it'll be Raya. He's definitely going to go my predicted 11 tomorrow, I have to say. Amorim's actually already announced so that Man United number 2, I've forgotten his name, is going to be in goal. So it's not Onana who's going to be in goal against Arsenal. It's going to be their number 2, the one who struggled in their match against Tottenham recently when they swung those corners in. And I think it was Son scored direct from a corner. So Declan Rice will probably take note of that, the way he swings the balls in from that side, aim for that far post and see what happens. But yeah, I think that it will probably be David Raya in goal tomorrow. I'd be surprised if it's not. On Amorim, I thought Arteta was quite interesting talking about United and what he's made of Amorim so far. He said, when you look, especially at the big teams that they've played and how they've performed and the results they've got, it's very impressive. I know him well. I followed him a lot when he was in Portugal. There's a big reason why he's where he is at the moment, and he deserves to be there. He was sort of asked about the comparisons between where United are now and what Amorim has walked into to what Arteta walked into at Arsenal 5 years ago. And there is definitely similarities, no doubt about it. You've got underperforming squad, highly paid, aging players who need to get moved on to bring new players in. And, there's definitely similarities there. And Mikel said, well, Ruben has much more experience than I had at that time. He's in a place and it's not COVID era. So I think he's got better options in that case. It's tough because you need to generate ideas, especially the way of playing and explaining that. And when you have that many games, it's tricky. So I understand. I mean, they've had a full week to prepare. This is the longest Amorim's ever had to prepare for a game since he's walked into the United job. And you would think that should be an advantage for him and for them. They're certainly going to come to Arsenal very well prepared. You go back to the game that Arsenal played against Everton a while back when they'd had 10 days to prepare, and you could see it in the way they played, how well drilled they were. They'd just spent 10 days working on nothing else but that Arsenal game. And United would have done that all this week. Arsenal, of course, haven't had that advantage because they had the Carabao Cup semi-final. Mikel was asked on noticing any difference in United from when, say, Arsenal played them in the league a few weeks ago into how they played against Liverpool last weekend. He said it's true they've played a little bit differently with the personnel that they use, the location of certain players, the characteristics of the players that they had dictate what they do and where they are, and they have more threats on both sides, defeat and in behind, because in the end, that's what determines the behaviours of a team. It's different in the last 2 weeks to when we played them at home, so I'm expecting a few different things. It will definitely be a different game to when Arsenal played them at home. You look in that match, there was no, like Ahmad didn't play, for example, did he? Yeah, I mean, Ahmad will certainly play this weekend. You'd imagine they're going to really look to get down the flanks and try and get behind the Arsenal fullbacks. They didn't really do that at all in the league game. It was very comfortable for Arsenal. They kept them at arm's length. Obviously picked them off with a couple of set piece goals in the second half, but United with no real threat at all in that game. And you would think they're definitely going to be more of a threat this time. Bruno was excellent against Liverpool. Dalot got down the left really well. Obviously, Ahmad performed well, like I said. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how United perform and how different that game is going to be than the one we saw in the league just a few weeks ago. But Mikel Arteta, clearly by these comments, thinks it is going to be a very, very different game. Right, moving on to what you guys have said in terms of potential team selections for this one. Ankit says, regarding the lineup, he needs to give Sterling a go. It makes no sense not to try him out at this point. Trossard should be brought from the bench. He is not a starter. I just don't see that happening. I don't see Sterling coming into this team at the weekend. I'd be very, very surprised. Just history does not suggest that he's going to play Raheem Sterling in any game, even if it's not a league game, even if it's the FA Cup. We've just not seen it. The fact he was left on the bench in the semi-final last week when Arsenal needed a goal. There's been plenty of other occasions when Arsenal needed a goal and he's turned to 5 other people on the subs bench, but not Raheem Sterling. So I agree. While he's here, he may as well be worth using, but I'd just be very surprised if we see him from the start. I can see maybe Gabriel Jesus playing on the right-hand side, but not Raheem Sterling. I'd definitely be surprised at that. Tato says, Charles, I think you might be mispronouncing Kvaratskhelia name. Yes, that wouldn't surprise me at all because I often do, don't I? So why change the habit of a lifetime? But yes, I'd love to see him at Arsenal. Your predicted 11 for the game at the weekend is Raya in goal, Timber, Saliba, Gabriel, Calafiori, Odegaard, Partey, and Rice. And as I just said, Jesus on the right, Havertz, and Martinelli. I do like the idea of seeing Jesus over there teaming up with Havertz. He's tried so many things on the right-hand side since Saka's gone down injured. And none of them, let's face it, aside from Nwaneri, really worked. And the fact that Nwaneri's injured now, he's not going to be there. Jesus, we've seen play on the right-hand side before. He's done it well. He did it well for Man City. He's done it well for Arsenal in the past. So, yeah, I'd be very open to seeing the two of them play together and Jesus sort of drift into that right-hand side a little bit. And John says, I would take the previous game lineup and just swap Trossard for Jesus, another one. Shouting for Jesus there. And then left back share between Calafiori and Lewis Skelly. I was debating with a few other journalists in a press conference yesterday whether it will be Calafiori or Miles starting a left back. I'm almost feeling like Miles Lewis Skelly is first choice left back at the moment, which is remarkable, really. But the fact he played on Tuesday night and the fact that you got the derby coming up on Wednesday as well, I think there's definitely the scope for Mikel to make a change in the left back position, maybe play Calafiori this weekend. And then if he is envisaging, and what a moment that would be for Lewis Skelly if he does get to start in the North London derby on Wednesday night. So, yeah, I can potentially see a bit of a change at left back this weekend, and that would mean Calafiori coming in and Miles Lewis Skelly potentially dropping out. Right, that's it from me today, everyone. Thank you very much for watching and for listening. Apologies again if I've missed any big breaking news that happened overnight, but yeah, I just had to get this recorded on Friday evening if I wanted to get a show out today. So yeah, apologies for that, but have a fantastic start to your weekend, wherever you're watching or listening to this around the world. I'll be back in the morning doing the predicted 11, that sort of thing, before making my way up to the Emirates for that big FA Cup third round clash. Have a good one, everyone. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.